Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Lee Feliciano with me here today. Lee has an undergraduate degree from Toronto Metropolitan University and an MBA from the Kellogg Graduate School of Business. Lee's a co-founder and COO of New Use Energy. Lee's worked in every segment of the solar industry. I believe you said you've been in it for 20 years. In 2006, Lee founded Soul Equity, a project development company responsible for the first large-scale commercial solar systems financed via power purchase agreements in Arizona. That's at Arizona State University. Soul Equity merged with Carbon Free Technology, a Toronto-based IPP, in 2009. Lee served on the board of Arizona Solar Energy Industry Association, and also served as an industry advisor at ASU in the Professional Science Master's Program, Solar Engineering and Commercialization. Thank you. Welcome to the show, Lee.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So you were also in the GIS industry before solar, even, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How did that transition happen?
So I worked the first 5 years of my career, for a Fortune 500 PepsiCo Food Services, kind of doing the GIS thing, location analysis for their restaurant group.
Okay.
It's now called Yum Brands. And after 5 years, I kind of decided I wasn't particularly enamored with corporate America, and decided to kind of set out on my own. So the next 5 to 7 years, I was running my own consulting business, mainly working for real estate companies, direct marketing companies, using GIS technology to do everything from customer profiling to site location analysis, for restaurants and retailers. And I decided to go back and get an MBA to kind of figure out how to take my business to the next level.
Okay.
But the end result of that period was my deciding I wanted to switch careers. And I picked renewable energy because I'd always been kind of fascinated with the topic. Initially looked at wind energy, and then but eventually gravitated towards solar because it was a more kind of universal technology. And that led me to Phoenix, Arizona. So I was based in Toronto, and I would have gone anywhere to get into the solar business. I'd made up my mind right around the time I was wrapping up school that I would get into the solar business. And I kind of goal oriented. So I worked the phones and found an opportunity in Phoenix. So that's what led me here in 2004.
Okay, excellent. I believe I was watching a show. I think Yuma might be the sunniest place on Earth.
There are a lot of sunniest places, but kind of like the most beautiful place in the world. To me, there is no most beautiful. I live in a fantastically, beautiful place, but I'm not going to say it's the most, right? There's just
that's a subjective one too.
Yeah. But yeah, so what's interesting about solar is everyone kind of naturally thinks, oh yeah, well, it's got to make sense here because it's really sunny, right? But one thing I learned early on in my solar career was a lot of it has to do with variables like policy, utility rates, the culture even, right? And so at one point in time, I used to do this comparison, Phoenix, Arizona versus Hamburg, Germany. Okay. Hamburg has about the exact same solar system, and Hamburg will produce about half as much energy as it will in Phoenix. But because of German policy and cost of energy, economically, it was more attractive to do solar in Hamburg.
Wow.
So that's kind of an extreme example.
Sure. That's a very good example. speaking of the uniqueness of Phoenix, there's a company that they're not really, they're solar powered panels, but they're hydro panels. Have you heard? It's a company here. They chose to be here not just because of the sun, because of the low humidity, to test their panels and to show that they can extract pure water from the air just with
I think I know the company you're referring to, and in general, that category of technology is referred to as atmospheric water generation.
Okay.
Maybe this is a little oversimplistic, but essentially you're creating a dehumidifier.
Right. Yeah.
You're extracting the water from the air and
Right.
drinking water. I mean, it's super cool technology. Some of it is fairly energy intensive, just like desalination. I mean, two different technologies, but
Right.
they require energy, obviously.
Right.
So
But they're solar power in the sense that you can put them anywhere in the world and just set them
absolutely.
down and they can function, which is pretty neat.
Right. And similar to solar electricity, the efficiency with which they perform that task varies, right, by your location.
Right.
But they are pretty much universal. It's just you get more productivity in certain areas than others.
Sure. Speaking of solar, I mean, I believe there was water heating is the most efficient use of solar. Is that right? With the tubes.
Yeah, so there's solar hot water, right?
Right.
Which is, I believe what you're referring to. And
You're right.
when I first moved here in 2004, that's actually what dominated the industry.
Okay.
Solar electric was very expensive, and solar hot water was the most economically viable solution
Right.
or technology. That has kind of flipped because solar hot water technology is essentially plumbing, right? Again, I'm
Right.
simplifying it, but it's plumbing. And so when you look at the cost of the inputs, right, in solar hot water, it's copper, tubing, pipes, glass. The cost of those commodities has not really declined like
Okay.
silicon, which is the main ingredient in most of today's solar cells, right?
The
And so
photovoltaic.
photovoltaic, correct, which is
Right.
solar electric, right?
Right.
And,
Which is
and
where the real demand is anyway.
right. And in fact, I was just speaking with a former solar hot water guy who is an old friend recently, and he was telling me he did the calculations, and in some instances, using solar electricity to heat water is now more cost effective.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because the price declines, right? Like, before we started the recording, I was telling you about how my first project, which was in 2009 at ASU, the solar panels there for that project cost me $3.75 a watt, which is kind of a unit cost we use in the industry. Today, those solar panels are twice as efficient and cost 30 cents a watt.
Right. So an order of magnitude cheaper, and well, it's a 20x difference, right?
Yeah. It's just,
Excellent.
it's huge. And we see a similar trend in battery technology.
Okay. So give us a quick snapshot of your business right now, what you do, what your
Yes.
company does.
Yeah. So, I as I mentioned, I've been in the solar industry for 20 years. About 4 years ago, I met a young man at a conference in Minnesota who approached me, after a presentation I did. And at the time, I was financing utility scale, large scale solar projects, so commercial, industrial, utility scale solar projects.
Okay.
And this young man had started an NGO, a nonprofit, whose mission was to power disaster relief and recovery operations using solar technology, as opposed to portable gas and diesel
Right.
generators.
Right.
And in some respects, I was kind of at the height of my career, commuting to New York City and financing these big projects. But there was something about this young man's story that was really compelling. And long story short is I mulled it over for a year, and I decided to quit my job and start a company that would support what he was doing,
Okay.
which is basically focusing on producing the best, toughest solar and battery generator on the market.
Okay.
And
So
that is
portable system.
portable systems, correct. And there are, I mean, a lot of people that would probably listen to this podcast most likely have seen a battery-based product similar to what I'm talking about, at Walmart or whatever, Home Depot.
Okay.
Um, uh, not to kind of knock the competition, but we call those consumer grade products because
Sure.
part of the story I heard that compelled me to start our business is that he had all these stories about how he would buy these products off the
Mhm.
shelf and deploy them at an evacuation center where 200 people a day were charging their cell phones, right? And
Right.
people were trying to run lights and communications, and these products weren't built for that type of duty cycle, that type of
Okay.
use case. They were more for like the occasional weekend camping trip,
Right.
and these products would basically give up. They would die after a month or two of that type of use, and they became e-waste, right? Because you had
Right.
lithium batteries and all that stuff, and they were essentially disposable. So I would say two of the main characteristics of our product, uh, in addition to its portability, its mobility, is the ruggedness, right? Because we cater to the professional user groups, um, but also we try to make our products more sustainable. So the most, from an engineering perspective, the components that have the highest probability of failure. I mean, you can build the best product in the world. There's always going to be a point of failure, right?
Okay.
And so what we try to do is we actually, to extent that we can, future-proof our products so that the components that are most likely to fail first are actually replaceable or upgradable.
Right. Okay. Nice. And so is there a lot of this is largely not the solar, but the battery power, the battery part.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. And there's a lot of competition in that space. Can you talk a little bit to that and what sort of sets you guys apart?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a healthy market actually for the consumer grade products out there, right? There are some large brands, very deep pocketed. We're a young company. Um, so I wouldn't say we're first in the space, but we're first to focus on the professional user, right? The professional
Okay.
grade product. So there are a lot of products out there that may be a lower price point, and that's the other sort of differentiator, right? Is um, I looked at that market, I saw the products, kind of made notes on their design, what I felt were their weak points, right? If you were kind of
Right.
using them in a harsh environment, like is often the case with disaster relief or also
Right.
military, which is something we're getting into,
Okay.
um, and essentially. Um, those products, like I said, they're not only sort of not built for that type of use case, um, but no one I've spoken with, some of the players, the larger players, they're caught in this price war.
Sure.
And one thing that was seared into my brain in business school was, in a price war, there are no winners, only survivors. And
Okay.
and it's kind of the spiral that we see a lot of those consumer companies kind of trapped in.
Okay.
Whereas, the areas that we have gotten traction into, which is disaster relief, emergency management, film production, to some extent construction, and now military. Um, those are areas where um, there's there's usually one or two dominant brands and a very high degree of brand loyalty among users.
Mhm.
Um, and B, um, there's less price elasticity, right? Like
Right.
once people kind of lock in on a brand because they've had a good experience with it,
Right.
less sensitive to, you know, oh yeah, this thing is a couple $100 less or whatever, right? So for those reasons, kind of our strategy is to really build this brand that has an origin story in disasters,
Sure. Sure.
but our goal, our strategy is to be the choice of the professional
Yeah.
user.
Right. Yeah. That's a great brand. That's the trusted of the experts and military grade components. I think that's also a huge potential brand, but also market for you.
Yeah. So that's relatively new, a new space for us. And I was actually, just before I got on this call, I was on a call with a gentleman who wants to carry our product, and he's been selling to the military for the past 20 years. So he's quite enthusiastic about what he's seen so far, and the feedback he's gotten from his customers.
Okay, what in that space? What is the biggest challenge? And when you say something that's durable, how what's its lifespan, or if it's some the overall system and the components that need to be swapped out?
Yeah. So there's two challenges. There's the technical and the economic, right? So and so from a technical standpoint, I think we are, we first of all, we took a form factor that was familiar to professionals around the world, which is a Pelican type case,
Right.
the black kind of rugged case that
Right.
you might see at the airport, where someone who's carrying sensitive equipment or expensive equipment, keeps it in, right? So
Right.
so we kind of picked that form factor because it was familiar to professionals, and
Sure.
of course of its physical characteristics, right? The ruggedness and all that. And so we kind of built a system around that. So that was step one. But step two is, we as a small company, we're kind of taking advantage of that, because the main advantage, in my experience, having worked for very large and very small companies, is, with a small company, you're nimble, right? And you need to take advantage of that. Your disadvantage is capital, right? Your cost of capital. So we are iterating our product very rapidly. We typically place an order with the factory for, let's say, 100 units. By the time we're ready to order the next 100, we've got little tweaks, right, based on customer feedback or our own experience.
Right.
So I would say that's less of a challenge and more of a, whatever. The flip side is the opportunity, right, of a challenge. And so, you have to move quickly and be nimble to kind of stay ahead, right?
Okay.
Especially of those that have, are much better capitalized than you are.
Right.
And then from the economic standpoint, our challenge is, as a young company, to be perfectly blunt, we're still in that, traversing the so-called valley of death.
Okay.
But the good news is, just within the last 12 months, this is our fourth year, we kind of see the other side, right? We
Okay.
still get there, but we can kind of see the landing point, so to
Okay.
speak, on the other shore. And so,
Excellent.
yeah, so
So you were talking about manufacturing. Where is it geographically important where you're having these manufactured? Is it local?
yeah, so we do some local assembly here in Phoenix. But we also, like many other companies, outsource. So we have a product that we engineer, that's built to our specifications
Okay.
in Asia.
Okay.
And but given our recent exposure and feedback from government buyers, I mean, not all government buyers are sensitive to it, but
Right.
certainly the military is more sensitive to foreign
Right.
made products. And so one of I guess you could say one of our current challenges, but it's something that we already have a roadmap for, is
Okay.
how to shift our supply chain, right, in
Okay.
order to cater to
Yeah.
that.
You remind me a lot of Elon, and I think of like SpaceX. They're not allowed to hire out to different countries for certain parts of it, right? Because this rocket technology is considered weaponizable and so forth. And there's certain things he's restricted on manufacturing in different places and with different employees and stuff. But also like the power cell, and trying to follow first principles, I guess, right? And find the industry path forward through rethinking some of these fundamental aspects.
Yeah, and ultimately, it is the battery, right? We were talking again earlier about how lithium is the standard pretty much today.
Mhm.
We keep an eye on the up and coming technologies, but the one thing a lot of people don't realize, my friends are constantly sending me emails. Oh, check out this technology I saw on YouTube, right?
Right.
And for the most part, we're familiar with those technologies, but what some people don't realize is, how long it takes to bring a product to market from the bench, right, from the lab. But second is, the incumbents who have invested billions of dollars in manufacturing infrastructure and supply chains are not going to just, turn over because they found a better mousetrap, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
And incumbents, whether you like it or not, the reality is incumbents will fight to protect their position.
Sure, sure. It's adoption can be very slow.
Yeah, they're usually in a better position to do so, right, than the new guys. So we kind of see that to a certain extent in the verticals that we're in, whether it's construction or film production. There are incumbent players and technologies, and it's not a simple matter of, oh, look, ours is better, right? It's understanding the frictions within those customer, those target organizations that prevent the adoption of the technology and trying to address them.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. And I guess, well, you have a number of challenges. Is one of your goals sort of an equity event where you get some bigger player who goes, "Oh, we want to acquire you and make you a division of our bigger company,"
Yeah, so
or just your technology or whatever? I don't know what sort of exits you have.
yeah, thank you for asking that question. So yes, I mean, we are, I've had a 15-year career in kind of GIS analytics and a 20-year career in solar. And so, I'd be lying if I didn't say I am looking toward an exit strategy. And so my goal is really to build that brand that I described to you earlier, and really find a strategic acquirer at some point. And I don't expect that to happen in a couple of years, maybe between 5 and 10 years. But in the meantime, we're always looking for capital to expand,
Right.
because we have a little bit of we're not always a first mover. Sometimes we're a second mover. We take advantage, of the lessons learned by the first movers, but we're early in the space, right? And
Right.
we're in an excellent position, in my opinion, to create that brand that everyone,
Yeah.
that comes to mind, right? Yeah, when someone is asked, what do you use or what would you buy? And so that's the goal. And part of that is, a strategic investment, right, in marketing, because the goals of marketing, and at least from my perspective, are twofold. One is revenue generation, but the other is brand building, and not all activities address both.
Okay. Right. Right. Speaking of branding, is new use energy? Is it new energy? Is it, what products, I guess, are you pushing? Are you looking for the biggest recognition with?
Yeah, so recently we have been referring to ourselves as NUE, right?
Okay.
For new use energy. And I kind of joke with my colleagues that, yeah, we're trying to go the KFC route, right? And just pick
Okay.
up those three letters, because the logo is very recognizable, and we've had people actually come up to us at shows, and because they recognize the logo. So it's
Okay.
have some effect. Our while our focus is portable, right? So we have a range of products. I would say our current bestseller is something that, again, fits in a Pelican case, about the size of a suitcase. It's not light, it's 120 pounds. So again, it's not for the casual kind of weekend
Sure.
warrior to throw in their van for a camping trip. But the reason it's that size and weight is because it is for industrial or commercial users
Right.
that need that amount of battery capacity to be meaningful, right? So to give you an example, in the film industry, we we have this great opportunity to pair our technology with LED lighting, which has now kind of taken over most, not all, but is now the predominant lighting technology in film, right? It took them 100 years to switch over to LEDs, just like with, households, right? But now that they have LEDs, which are much more energy efficient, pairing an LED light with our product opens up all these new possibilities from a creative standpoint, because you're not tethered to a giant extension cord attached to a generator on one end, right? So from a film creative standpoint, our product, which has a battery and an LED light, can now be placed anywhere in minutes, set up and taken down in minutes. So that opens up creative opportunities. but there's also economic benefits.
Right.
The fact that you are that much more nimble. I mean, literally, we have case studies where we can share with people in the industry who might normally have taken a weekend to film a scene,
Okay.
can now do it in 6 hours.
Okay. Okay. That sort of infrastructure or logistical
Yeah.
efficiency is really important.
Yes. Yeah.
Particularly
And
nowadays when time is and right, people's time is the most expensive.
yes. And exactly. And we, like I said, we have the case studies. We're still constantly being challenged, but I would say our the biggest barrier to the whole industry just like embracing this technology because it makes sense on so many levels is just the fact that people are used to doing things a certain way, right?
Right.
And old habits die hard, as they say.
Okay. Right. So we talked a little bit about your future, right? So potential equity event and so forth. One thing I like to talk about sometimes on the show is passive income, right? A lot of people in tech fields, when they're trying to transition out of their industry or something, you start looking for more passive income. What are your thoughts on that?
So what's interesting about the solar industry, and this kind of goes back to my previous corporate job where I was involved in financing large scale
Okay.
solar projects, right? And I apologize in advance to some of your listeners if I geek out for a second here, but
No, bring it.
when you do project finance, right? Typically, when you're financing a project, real estate, let's say, your capital stack, right, is comprised of debt and equity, right? That's pretty standard. In the renewable energy space for over the past decade, there's been kind of this third element, which is what's referred to as tax equity,
Okay.
because the product, not all of our products, because our products are small and portable, but certainly I think many listeners probably are aware that when you put a solar system on your house or your building,
Right.
you get a tax credit, right? So some of our products, including some of our best-selling products, are actually eligible for that tax credit.
Okay.
And one of our challenges, in the big scale solar world, is I could finance a project and I could bring in 30% of the cost of that project, and get it funded in the form of tax equity. In other words, someone investing for the tax credit,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Obviously getting a return from it. And this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, because if a third party, if it's your business, you can take the tax credit, obviously. But a lot of the industry is driven by third-party investors, right? People who are looking, in some cases, just to invest to get the tax benefit. And one of the rules around being qualified to take that tax benefit is it has to be against passive income.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
again, sorry, that was kind of a very long-winded answer, but that is my link to passive income.
Okay. Is you have losses to offset it.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, as we sort of wrap up the interview, I wanted to ask about any exciting plans in the next 6-12 months. Any big initiatives you guys have coming up?
Yeah, so we are, it always takes longer, right, than you expect for something to happen. So when I kind of embarked on this journey, I kind of said, okay, I'm going to have to tighten my belt and be prepared to, last 12 to 18 months before things really get traction and
Sure.
we're
Or more, right?
well, yeah, that's right, exactly, the or more part, right? So I'm in year 4, and as I mentioned to you, hopefully, we are cautiously optimistic that next year we'll kind of see that that inflection point
Right.
because of events that are taking place right now, right?
Okay.
So as I mentioned to you earlier, we've been in the film production space for just under a year, and
Okay.
the industry itself was in a slowdown because of the strikes, and they're just kind of coming back on, right? So we took that opportunity to kind of build relationships and socialize, which we hope will pay off in next year. We we have been involved in discussions with, government and military customers. And again, our products are currently being or about to be tested by those users. So, there is a
That's
lag.
exciting. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And then also, one last thing I want to mention, because it is a big part of my background, is, these days, most solar is happening on a very large scale, right? Utility scale. And we're talking about solar farms, fields, which are literally 2 to 3,000 acres or more, just
Right.
covered in solar panels. And one of the, I'll call it dirty little secrets, is that when you're building those solar arrays and attaching the panels to the racking and all that,
Right.
they actually bring generators out in the field, right? Because you've got a 2,000 acre job site, you can't run a
Sure.
big extension cord. So they bring diesel generators out there just to charge power tool batteries to mount solar panels.
Right.
And that is a task that our equipment can easily deal with.
Right.
But again, it's dealing with, what people are used to, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic in 2025 that, some of the very large construction companies that are involved in this space will finally, because we are being tested by a couple of different companies, but I'm kind of hoping that, these folks will finally embrace this. But
Yeah.
certainly it it is kind of for selfish reasons that I'm pointing out that, hey, they're using diesel to build solar, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
perhaps we need to shame some of these people into actually using solar to build solar, because it actually makes sense.
Right. Well, there's obviously a niche there, right? If you can, why do they, what's that gap? And if you can fill it with solar, right? That sounds great. If you can have the portable energy powering all their stuff, I'm sure they'd prefer that.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, it's more the internal frictions of the organizations themselves, like the bureaucracy or the procurement or, whatever,
Right.
that tend to slow things down, because everyone in the field who sees our product, their reaction is, why the bleep aren't we doing this?
Right. Right. And I imagine with those products, you need fast charging, you need batteries that can charge and release. I don't know if it's called the duty cycle, but you need the more versatile type of batteries.
Yeah, so not as demanding as, let's say, an EV application.
Okay.
Because typically, and we'll use construction specifically, it's shift work, right? So you have the crew. I mean, this is construction in Arizona, so you know probably as well as I do that, guys start before sunrise and try and, wrap up by noon, give or take. And so at that point, the sun is high in the sky. These crews are basically, packing it up for the day, plugging their batteries into charge in order to show up. Yeah. And then they'll show up the next morning, right, at 4 a.m. or whatever.
Right.
So you really have all day or a lot of the day to
Okay.
charge those batteries up. So it's actually a very easy use case. And it took me, a couple of years to kind of realize and deal with my frustration over why aren't these people getting it, right? Like, it's
Right.
so obvious to understand that it's not necessarily about the desire of the customer, but the really just, kind of the workings of the industry or the organization themselves that can sometimes slow down adoption.
Right. Right. Yeah, I could keep talking to you I got a lot of questions, but one of them is the Phoenix area stuff. I'm back to sort of the manufacturing here locally. I know there's some battery plants and they're trying to build more stuff here, but obviously I don't know where they're sourcing their lithium and cobalt and stuff. But is that something you can leverage?
We intend to. The one thing that I can say, from personal experience, right, is that we've talked to a number of these companies that are setting up factories. It takes years, right? From the time you get your permitting or just put the plan together, because I worked as a developer, a project developer. So it takes years. So interestingly enough, some of the policies that were put in place, legislation, both federal and state, that were put in place to facilitate the building of these factories, they kicked in two plus years ago, but we won't actually see their impact, like the end product,
Right.
which we are eager to use, for another year or two. So there's literally, 4 to 5 year lag between the time a piece of legislation is passed and the time you actually get to experience the final benefit or the product that was intended to support. So we're, for the time being, the vast majority of batteries in the world are made in Asia, mostly China, and that will not change until, like I said, a lot of these new factories come on stream in the next year or two.
Okay. Interesting. On that note of having to wait over time for things to happen, right? Do you have any lessons or insights for people you can share of things you wish you would have known sooner or would have done sooner about building your wealth or success in your career?
Well, I guess I like to say the jury's still out. I mean, I talk to a lot of young entrepreneurs. I'm not a young entrepreneur. I've been around the block a couple of times. This is my third startup. I guess when I say startup, companies I started from scratch, I would say don't expect to hit a home run on your first go. If you do, you're one of the few that's been incredibly lucky. But at the same time, I think it's okay to do, and I'm not a sports guy, but I'll use a sports analogy. It's okay to just kind of do, base hits, right? And advance yourself. So my first startup was a complete failure. I lost money. My second startup was a modest success where I sold to a company, but it was what I would describe as an acqui-hire, right? Meaning I made money, but they were interested in me also to be part of that new company. And so I'm hoping that perhaps this round it will be that home run that every seeks. But it was iterative, right? It was a progression.
Yes, that's some of the most successful people I can think of all say the same thing, right? They just failed forward. They just kept going and going until they got one that clicked.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it always takes longer than you expect. So you have to plan for it.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Lee, for your time today and sharing some insights and tips with us. If people would like to connect with you, what should they do?
So you can go to our website, newuseenergy.com. And you can connect with me through there, or you can go to my LinkedIn page or LinkedIn profile, and it's under Lee Feliciano at New Use Energy.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you very much, Lee Feliciano, for joining me today. We appreciate you sharing all of your solar insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.